In our headlines at this hour, South Korea reports well over 73,000 new COVID-19 infections on this Tuesday, the highest daily tally in more than 80 days. President Yoon is meeting with U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in Yongsan today to address economic security. And the UN is appealing for collective action against climate change, claiming that collective suicide is the only other option. Europe is battling raging wildfires in Spain, Greece, France and others, with hundreds of fatalities linked to suffocating mercury levels, which researchers claim are consistent with climate change. Now, in response, the United Nations is calling for collective action against climate change, claiming that collective suicide is the callous consequence we face in the absence of such action. Our Sang-hyeok starts us off.
Wildfires broke out across Europe and in North America over the weekend. Even in South America, the ancient Machu Picchu archaeological site was threatened by fire. The extreme heat saw records broken in some parts of the world, including in India and South Asia. Over in the UK, an extreme heat warning was issued with record high temperatures expected on Tuesday, which could see the mercury reach 40 degrees Celsius. Droughts have also devastated parts of Africa. All signs point to climate change, something many climate experts have been warning about for decades. Amid the heat emergency, the two-day Petersburg Climate Dialogue kicked off in Berlin on Sunday, with government representatives from 40 countries meeting to discuss major climate protection agreements and focusing on preparations for the COP27 World Climate Conference in Egypt, slated for later this year. There, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres gave a stern warning on the state of the world if no immediate action is taken.
Excellencies, this has to be the decade of decisive climate action. That means trust, multilateralism and collaboration. We have a choice, collective action or collective suicide. It is in our hands.
Guterres also warned that half of humanity is in the danger zone from floods, droughts, extreme storms and wildfires, adding that no nation is immune. Despite this, he says, countries continue to feed their fossil fuel addiction. For some world leaders, action is already being taken.
This decade will be the decade of transformation, the decade in which we will build the foundation for a CO2-neutral economy. In less than 25 years, by 2045, we want to become one of the first carbon-neutral industrialized countries.
While world leaders continue to call for significant changes to become more carbon neutral, some argue their decades-long plans to phase out reliance on fossil fuels will come too late. Sang-hyeok, Arirang News.
And in related news, intense heat alerts have been issued in several European countries as overwhelming summer temperatures challenge public well-being. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The UK's first ever red warning for extreme heat has been issued for the heart of England throughout Monday and Tuesday. This comes as temperatures up to about 41 degrees Celsius baked an area from London all the way north to Manchester and York, and breaking the previous record of 38.7 degrees set in 2019. The government urged people to work from home, while many schools and doctors' offices shut their doors. Rail services were limited over fears the tracks would buckle, and flights at Britain's largest air base were halted. France also struggled to cope with scorching heat as extreme temperatures continue to hit the country as well.
We are drinking a lot because it's super hot, and we try to stay in the shade because with the sun, it's hard. The heat, it's too much.
To this end, the French authorities also issued its highest possible alert level along its Atlantic coast, warning of a, quote, heat apocalypse. The heat has been detrimental in other areas of Europe, with rapidly spreading wildfires in France, as well as Spain and Portugal, leading to mass evacuations. Against this backdrop, much of Europe is experiencing a drought as a winter-spring precipitation deficit was worsened by early heat waves. Studies show this could lead to a severe soil moisture deficit as well as a vegetation stress. A drought emergency has been declared in 5 Italian regions, while insufficient water availability has led to multiple use restrictions across municipalities. Similar measures to restrict water use have also been put in place in France. Kim Hasan, Arirang News.
Here on the local front, there has been an alarming rebound in South Korea's daily COVID-19 tally. Authorities today have announced 73,582 new infections. Now, this is roughly double the tally shared a week ago. It's also the first time in 83 days that the daily tally has surpassed 70,000. Given the early rebounding caseloads, officials say they have yet to calculate the current wave's peak. Initially, officials had spoken about a resurgence in late summer or early autumn. President Yoon Suk-yeol hopes to further advance the Seoul-Washington alliance during talks with U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen at his office this afternoon. In response to a question about the likelihood of additional sanctions on North Korea, President Yoon said he believes there will be discussions on developing the bilateral alliance to include economic security, as agreed during talks with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden here in Seoul back in May. Meanwhile, talks with Yellen are also expected to address supply chains, sanctions on Russia, and a possible currency swap deal between Seoul and Washington. Efforts by the Yoon and Kishida administrations to reinvigorate diplomatic ties between Seoul and Tokyo appear to be taking tangible shape. Foreign Minister Park Jin and his Japanese counterpart Yoshimasa Hayashi held talks in Japan Monday afternoon, and our Kim Dami has more on what was addressed.
South Korea is speeding up its efforts to improve the icy bilateral ties with Japan, with Seoul's top diplomat in Tokyo for the first time in nearly 5 years. During their first in-person talks on Monday, South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin and his Japanese counterpart Yoshimasa Hayashi discussed mutual interests and put their heads together on ways to pursue a future-oriented relationship. And that included the issue of compensation for the Koreans Japan subjected to wartime forced labor. While the two sides agreed on the need for resolving the matter at an early date, Park pledged to what he could do so that there are desirable solutions before the assets of related Japanese firms are liquidated.
There are many good opinions coming out. We will explain this situation to Japan and put together all our wisdom to find the most reasonable solution.
Revitalizing people-to-people exchanges also topped Monday's talk, including a visa waiver between the two countries. The two diplomats further agreed to deal firmly with North Korea's latest military ambitions and beef up cooperation with the U.S. in pursuit of diplomatic solutions. Hopes are also high that Park's 3-day visit could include a sit-down with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, which could pave the way for the first summit between the current leaders of the two countries. Park also plans to pay respects to Japan's late former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
And in other news, boosting supply to satisfy demand to ultimately stabilize prices. Now, this is the gist of the Land Ministry's housing policy, while the Environment Ministry seeks to actively promote green initiatives. Our Presidential Office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has more on the recent reports by the two ministries at the top office.
Providing more homes to meet rising demand. The key housing policy under the new Yoon administration is to provide at least 2.5 million in urban areas and around key transportation hubs nationwide. Details will be unveiled next month.
The Land Ministry will put all-out efforts to weather the economic crisis and stabilize people's livelihoods.
To ease the debt burden of the lower income bracket, the government will shift loans with the high interest rates to lower ones and switch to fixed-rate home mortgage loans. Various environmental assessments will be integrated to shorten the approval time needed for new buildings.
President Yoon asked his land minister to prioritize housing stabilization and housing welfare, which are key to people's livelihoods.
The Land Ministry aims to help more Korean businesses tap into overseas infrastructure markets, branding it as K-Smart Infra, and eyeing new opportunities in the Middle East, Ukraine, and Iraq. It will also push ahead with commercializing Level 3 autonomous cars by the year's end and those of Level 4 by 2027. In 3 years' time, South Korea is looking at the use of a full-blown urban air mobility. President Yoon was also briefed on ways to tackle the energy challenge facing the entire world. His Environment Ministry's plan is to make the most out of nuclear power, reallocate carbon credits among industries, and tackle environment pollution by cutting ultra-fine dust levels by 30% within the next 5 years. To do so, more incentives will be provided when there is a shift to clean fuel or scrapping of old diesel vehicles. How to fight the affordable housing and energy crises at once. That was what Monday's policy briefings were all about here at the presidential office, while for the rest of the week, the president will focus on the nation's foreign policy, security, and national defense. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Right, and that ends the first half of our program. We'll return with the second half in a bit. Stay with us.
What matters?
Welcome back. A pride parade took place here in Seoul this past Saturday. And for more on where South Korea stands with regard to social acceptance of sexual minorities as compared to its counterparts, I have a panel of foreign journalists here in the studio. I have Rafael Rashid with me. Rafael, it's good to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Thomas Maresca here in the studio. Thomas, it's good to see you again.
Glad to be here.
Right. Rafael, the first Pride Parade here in Seoul took place in the year 2000, I believe, and I understand there were about 50 participants. Now, compared to that particular event, the event this past Saturday drew lots of people, thousands of people, I understand. Let's start with a few words on the event this year.
Yes, so this was the first offline event in 3 years. As you know, it was due to COVID. There was a hiatus for 2 years and was held online in 2020 and 21. And approximately 100,000 plus people are estimated to have gathered in Seoul's main plaza from the LGBTQ community, but also their allies, in a display or a celebration of identity, and also to show solidarity with the community. This year's event had the slogan, "Let's live, be together and move forward." There were also many booths that were set up. There were live performances on stage, and it ended with a street parade. Unfortunately, the weather didn't hold and a lot of people got soaked wet.
Right, because it was raining. Now, this year's event was also attended by foreign diplomats in a show of solidarity, as you mentioned, Rafael. Before we continue with our talk, let's take a quick listen then to the words of the US and British ambassadors.
We're going to fight with you for equality and human rights. Thank you.
저와 여러분 모두는 같은 가치와 믿음을 가지고 있기에 이 자리에 모였습니다. 우리는 이 사회 모두가 공평하게 평등하다고 믿습니다.
Right, and those were the remarks by the US and British ambassadors. Thomas, what are your thoughts on the presence of such diplomatic support for the LGBTQ community here on the local front?
Well, I think among the participants in the parade, in the event, it's appreciated. You know, I think the remarks were well received. I would say in the case of Philip Goldberg, the U.S. ambassador, he also seems to have become a lightning rod for the opposition. They seem to have really kind of focused on him in some of their angle of attack against the LGBTQ movement here, and you know, kind of framing the issue to some extent as, oh, here's an example of the West bringing this kind of decadent idea to Korea, you know, which is an echo in a sense of, you know, things you hear in Putin's Russia or, you know, autocratic regimes around the world. So, yeah, he's sort of become a focus of the opposition. I think practically speaking, you know, the participation of ambassadors doesn't really move the issue forward in a really tangible way. I mean, there's not much they can do to address domestic policy or something, but, you know, I think perhaps in some small way it might nudge the issue forward. The more that perhaps people see foreign, you know, relatively high-profile foreign figures speaking out at these types of events, you know, they might ask, where are the South Korean, you know, politicians? Or, you know, it might also give some cover maybe to some South Korean figures who might want to speak out or attend in the future. You know, maybe in just a more general way, people might start asking the question, you know, why in South Korea are we sort of such outliers about an issue that many other countries that we share similar values with are much more sort of supportive of?
Right, questions are being raised. Rafael, the British ambassador, Colin Crooks, as you just heard, gave his speech in Korean. He drew much applause and praise from the crowd there. What impact does such participation by foreign diplomats look to have on the impact of efforts to perhaps promote awareness with regard to sexual minorities here in South Korea?
Right. I think, I think the presence of the ambassadors does have a huge impact, not only for the people who are affected, who can gain a sense of belonging or even relevance in a society that might not be so welcoming, but also their presence, of course, generates a lot of headlines in Korea. And I mean, the fact that we're even talking about it today shows to what extent they have a certain effect on Korean media to report on these issues. And the presence of the embassies and the diplomats goes beyond the Pride events. It seems to be a continuous or sustained effort by a group of maybe a dozen or so embassies who are not just attending these Pride events, but also other events, exhibitions, art exhibitions, and also writing op-eds in newspapers, attending seminars, organizing conferences. So there seems to be a lot more sustained efforts over the past few years. This comes in line with their foreign policy. LGBTQ rights promotion is part of a lot of these countries' foreign policy, and I think we're going to see a lot more over the coming years. And I think politicians and people in power are listening, and I don't think they're blind to what is happening.
Right, hopefully not. Thomas, how far has South Korea come in terms of social acceptance and perhaps understanding of the LGBTQ community?
Well, you know, from people I've spoken to that have been involved in the community for a long period of time, I mean, clearly there has been progress in terms of acceptance and awareness. Surveys show, especially among younger generation, there's a large gap between, you know, one example in Gallup 2021 survey, the question of support for same-sex marriage, overall 52% against, but people in their 20s, it was 73% for, people in their 60s, it was 17%, you know, so there's a real movement among younger generations. At the same time, though, I think discrimination is clearly still quite rampant in society, you know, from high schools to the military. There's been quite a few news articles and reports about, you know, cases along those lines. And, you know, I think even beyond the overt discrimination, I mean, it still seems to me like an observational day-to-day level. It's still such a kind of a low profile presence in the day-to-day society. And in some ways, I think, you know, for many reasons, it's that way. I think that people keep a low profile from the community. But so in a sense, sometimes it feels like the support maybe is almost a little abstract. You know, you see the opposition is very vocal and very present much of the time. And I think people, you know, I think the attitudes have changed among young people, but you know, it's still a bit like out of sight, out of mind on a day-to-day level, I think, for a lot of reasons.
And staying with the same question, Raphael, what are your thoughts on the advances made here socially with regard to the LGBTQ community?
I think, you know, to reiterate similar points, I think there has been progress, but of course there is a long way to go. And sometimes I feel like for every step forward, you see one or two steps backward. It's a bit of a mix, but I think there's certainly been a lot more conversations regarding LGBTQ issues in Korea. And we're seeing a little bit more maybe visibility, for example, in the entertainment industry, more portrayals on screen. And even just recently, an openly bisexual woman was elected to become part of the Mapo District Council in Seoul. So these are just small steps forward. And also, the Supreme Court recently overturned the convictions of 2 soldiers who were charged for having a same-sex relation in the military, which is, I guess, technically still illegal. But now I would say courts are being more forgiving with this controversial law. So overall, I think that these are small steps, but significant steps nonetheless.
Right, and staying with Lord Thomas, as mentioned, though, there is still much to be desired with regard to the rights of sexual minorities, especially under a legal framework. And that being said, what do you believe are some of the crucial issues that need to be addressed?
Well, I think the key issue that people have been looking to for decades almost now is the passage of some form of anti-discrimination legislation that has been floating around since at least 2007, and there's many different bills that have been kind of raised in National Assembly but never seem to cross the line to even get a vote taken. And I think, you know, that's got to be the fundamental sort of, you know, platform on which progress can really start to be built for all the things we've mentioned, you know, about social awareness. I mean, there's still, without that fundamental recognition of just kind of an equal right and suddenly, you know, a legal recourse to, if you do want to suddenly come out into the open and you're discriminated against at work or something, now you have an actual legal recourse to do something about it. And I think that needs to happen in conjunction with whatever the changing social attitudes are, because that will really be the lever, I think, to make sustained progress. And that's a goal that has been at the basis, I think, of this movement for a long time. And incidentally, it's not just about LGBTQ rights. I mean, there's gender equality issues, disability, just various other minority or under-recognized groups in the society have also been really pulling for this
right. It
some
really
form
is
of legislation.
A complex network right there. And keeping in mind what Thomas has just said, Raphael, based on the experience of other countries perhaps then, what are your prospects with regard to some tangible progress within the legal arena to support the LGBTQ community?
I mean, of course, I think an anti-discrimination law in Korea is inevitable, and it will eventually happen. It will depend, of course, on who will have the political will to push for this bill or these bills or law to become a reality. And as Thomas has said, it's been dragging on for quite a few years, almost 15 years now. For example, even if we look at other countries, in the case of the UK and the Equality Act, there was, of course, a lot of debate surrounding this law, and there were certain concerns and controversies. And I think if we look at the case of Korea, when it comes to this law or this bill, I think there should be meaningful discussions around it, sincere discussions, and also discussions with certain conservative members of society who are opposed to this law. I think it's going to be important, like in other countries, to clarify exactly what this law is and what it isn't, and also dispel any fake news or wrong concerns or rumors about this law, and also, like Thomas said, make people understand that this isn't a law, an LGBTQ law. It is a law for everyone that simply would help. It would ban discrimination against all forms, or many different categories, and anyone in society can be the victim of discrimination.
Right. Thomas, as Raphael mentioned earlier, the entertainment industry here has been playing a very important role in perhaps raising awareness about the LGBTQ community. And what more perhaps can be done to make effective use of this particular medium to perhaps better reach out to members of the public?
Well, yes, clearly we're seeing more representation in the media. It still is in I think, an early stage. I mean, there's a handful of celebrities that are either out or transgender, and we're seeing storylines and characters in some dramas, like the show Itaewon Class had a transgender character, and I think that's important, and representation, I think, is definitely an important factor. To my reading of it, it still feels a bit like the way it's presented is still kind of an issue rather than a, often the characters, it's something where the fact of their identity is a challenge, or, they're facing discrimination in their characterization, where, I would look to an example from the US is, that people often point to is the show Will and Grace. I don't know if you remember this from the 90s and early 2000s, and that was a show that, the main characters were just sort of openly gay men, and that was really it. Otherwise, it was a normal sitcom. It wasn't really about them struggling, and people often point to that as having a real impact on just kind of normalizing or familiarizing a mass audience with the subject. So, maybe that's a place that Korea gets to. And I would just say quickly, the other thing is, for really big level stars like a BTS, for example, I mean, they're outspoken about equality and anti-discrimination and accepting yourself kind of on a global scale. I think within South Korea, it's still like a taboo or a tripwire for a lot of big acts to address issues locally mainly, I think, because the structure of the industry is still so studio-centric, and there's still so much kind of control over the public persona of big stars. So that's also a challenge.
Right, and there is room for change, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like all these things we're talking about, there's kind of a momentum, but will it be?
Have to wait and see, though.
Yeah.
Raphael, very quickly speaking, back to the parade in Seoul. What are some of the similarities, perhaps, and differences between the Pride Parade here in South Korea and those elsewhere?
Yeah, I think, similarities with Pride parades around the world is the common theme of a celebration of identity and solidarity. Maybe one unfortunate point of the Seoul Pride Festival is the policy, especially for journalists, of being careful not to take photos, or at least take photos from a distance. And if you take a photo close up, you would have to ask the permission of the subject, or just blur out the face entirely. And I think I understand why this policy is in place. It's important, but it also highlights fundamentally the issue of discrimination in society, because if people are outed publicly, it could have devastating effects to their lives, and I think it highlights the ongoing rampant discrimination in South Korean society.
Right. All right, Raphael, then on that note, we'll have to end today's discussion. Thank you very much for your time and your thoughts, and Thomas, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A rather intriguing trend is emerging here on the local front. In light of the weakening South Korean currency, duty-free shopping is proving to be more expensive than that at department stores. Our Yoon explains.
With COVID-19 measures relaxed across the globe, holidaymakers are jetting off on vacations as travel restrictions were also lifted just in time for the summer holiday season. But the duty-free industry that had anticipated a parallel recovery has been left with virtually no customers, with more staff at stores than shoppers. Once upon a time, many Koreans traveled just to take advantage of cheaper duty-free shopping. But the current soaring exchange rate is making this concept a thing of the past. Duty-free stores sell products in US dollars. The current won to US dollar exchange rate is hovering around 1,300 won compared to 1,134 won a year ago. Taking away the price competitiveness that duty-free stores had, most products are currently cheaper at department stores.
There's no big difference from department store prices, so there's no particular reason to use duty-free shops.
Travelers may be returning to airports, but are skipping the chance to do some duty-free shopping. Because of this, major duty-free stores have been left counting their losses for the first quarter of this year, with the outlook for the holiday season not looking any brighter. And with duty-free stores trying to find a solution, Lotte Duty Free has introduced an exchange rate compensation policy. This means that depending on the exchange rate at the time of sale, up to 60% of the price difference is returned in cash-like reward points.
Our rewards program offers returns in proportion to the exchange rate changes. We want to help lessen the burden for customers so they can spend at duty-free shops like before.
The government has also stepped in to help the slower-than-expected travel industry recovery, with duty-free limits for Koreans to be raised for the first time in 8 years from the current $600 to $800. 이은진, Arirang News.
Lunch is becoming a costly affair for workers in general amid soaring inflation, and thus many are seeking more affordable options. Our Sang-hyeok was out and about.
Checking out lunch boxes at a convenience store has become a daily routine for Park Jung-woo. Grabbing lunch at a restaurant had been his usual choice, but now doing that would put him over his lunch budget.
Consumer prices have gone up really high these days. So instead of going to a restaurant for lunch, I go to convenience stores. It has lots of benefits. You can eat fast, and most of all, it's cheap.
And there are many others who are in the same boat.
Kukbap used to cost around 5,000 won, but the price has now doubled, even tripled. It's become unaffordable, so I pack my own lunch or grab a quick bite at a convenience store.
Lunch would cost around 8,000 won before, but now it rises to 9, even 10,000. So I go to all-you-can-eat buffets or convenience stores.
What these people are experiencing is called lunchflation, the rising cost of lunch amid surging inflation. According to Statistics Korea, dining out costs soared 8% on year in June, the largest increase in 30 years. In fact, for Koreans, some of the most popular lunch items, such as kimbap and jjajangmyeon, also their prices rise. And now more people are heading to convenience stores looking for cheaper options. With more people stopping at convenience stores during lunch breaks, 4 major convenience store chains in Korea have all seen a rise in lunchbox sales on air. This became more evident as the month went by in tandem with the soaring consumer prices. Lunchflation has also boosted online food sales as consumers decide to purchase meals in advance at affordable prices. Data from an online grocery shopping mall shows that sales increased significantly during the second quarter of this year. By item, sales of corn dogs tripled, frozen ready meals jumped by over 60%, sandwiches grew 30%, and other meal substitute options such as protein bars and bread also climbed. An official from the company explains that these items are popular, particularly among the economically active population, the group that's hit hardest by lunchflation.
The sales of quick and easy food items during the second quarter grew rapidly compared to the first quarter, jumping by 50 to 70%. And the top consumers are office workers and women in their 30s and 40s.
An expert explains this growing popularity of lunchboxes came as a result of office workers and students trying to find a better lunch option.
Office workers try hard to find well-balanced yet affordable lunch options, and lunchboxes are the go-to options for them because they offer various choices at cheaper prices.
As for lunchflation, the expert says it won't settle yet, not until the end of this year, citing skyrocketing inflation across the world caused by geopolitical uncertainties as a reason why. 신새벽, Arirang News.
South Korean high jumper Sang-hyeok is bringing home the silver medal from the World Atlantic Championships in Oregon. Now, at the competition on Monday, local time, recorded his own national record of 2.35 meters to finish second to Mutaz Essa Bashim of Qatar. The 26-year-old Woo has become the first South Korean to garner a world title for high jump, and this is the second outdoor title after Kim Hyun-seop's bronze medal in the year 2011, that is, for the 20-kilometer walk. Now, the two-time defending champion and Tokyo Olympic gold medalist Mutaz Essa Bashim took the high jump gold with a jump of 2.37 meters. Ukraine's Andrei Protsenko, who won the bronze with 2.33 meters. South Korea's Air Force aerobatic display team recently secured top global acclaim for stunning performances by the team's demonstration pilots on international skies. Our Peonji has more.
South Korean fighter planes loop and spin across the sky to create the shape of the Korean flag. Spectators cheer as the planes also leave trails in the shape of a heart and an arrow going straight through it. They're the Black Eagles, an air display team from the South Korean Air Force. For 4 days from last Friday, the team took part in the Royal International Air Tattoo, or RIAT, the world's biggest air show held in England.
I feel very honored to take part in the world's biggest air show. Our team will be showing the amazing skills that the South Korean fighter pilots have and the power of our country's T-50 jets to all those who gathered here from all over the world.
The Black Eagles also demonstrated a formation where they scattered upwards in the air, leaving blue and red trails. One spectator and a fan of the Black Eagles says this is something that no other team has shown.
And I do like that formation they break where they do the rolls as well. I can't remember what that's called, but that's a really unique one. I've not seen someone do that before.
The team pulled off a total of 24 different air maneuvers during its performance and won the King Hussein Memorial Sword for the best overall flying demonstration among all teams from 34 countries. The team was also given the As the Crow Flies trophy for the best flying demonstration as judged by the members of the Friends of the Royal International Air Tattoo. 배은지, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, one Korean American took it upon herself to create a South Korean princess when she realized Disney had yet to include one in its own lineup. Our Song Yujin has this fairy tale.
There was no Korean Disney princess, so I decided to make my own.
The fish in the sea can't stop me. All of the waves in the world can't rock me.
With the snap of a finger, a Disney-style character wearing a Korean traditional hanbok pops out and sings. It's the work of Julia Ryu, a Korean-American composer and writer. Back in January, the 22-year-old uploaded this clip of her singing a tune from her original musical, Simcheong, to social media. Based on the Korean folktale Simcheongjeon, it shows the journey of Simcheong, who finds herself in a magical kingdom after diving into the sea to save her blind father. The video has garnered over 1 million views in less than a month. Then, how did this all start? I got a chance to speak with Julia Ryu during her visit to Korea last week. Growing up in Missouri, Ryu saw herself more as a sidekick than a main character, as she barely saw Koreans on screen or on stage. But she wanted this to change.
And so I think wanting to contribute to that feeling for the next generation of kids, to be able to see themselves in something as widespread as Disney, as celebrated and uplifting and well-known as Disney, I think would not only help those kids be able to see themselves as a lead character, but also would help other people to be able to see us, Koreans, as lead characters as well.
The opportunity came when she decided to unite her root culture with musical theater for her senior thesis project at Harvard, where she studied theater, dance, media, and music. But why Simcheong in particular?
So I think the reason that I first connected with the folktale originally is that it is this story about a young woman who is looking to return home and to reconnect with her family. And at the time that I first started writing Simcheong, I was, I think, harboring a deep question, and really since I was young, of who am I, where do I belong?
After her video went viral, Ryu was showered with messages from the Korean and Korean-American community saying they felt the same way growing up and hope to see a Korean Disney princess soon. But she dreams big.
My ultimate dream is to be able to help contribute to a movement of cultural understanding and diversity and empathy in the theater, music, and film space.
To help make her dream become reality, Ryu will soon move to New York, the heart of the entertainment industry, to work on more productions, which of course includes continuing to develop Simcheong. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Necessity indeed appears to be the mother of invention. The need to escape mosquitoes during the hot, humid summer here has led to an innovative and inexpensive way of controlling their movement. Our Kim Jong-sil has details.
One of the least welcome guests in the summer months that bothers people day and night. The mosquitoes. If only there was a simple way to curb their numbers. We went out to hear what people had to say about this tiny summer party crusher.
When I go to a mountain, black mosquitoes bite me unless I move around constantly. They bite so much it hurts. When I come home, I feel so itchy I have to wash the bite marks off with water.
I get bitten all the time, so I prepare repellent and stuff like that more than other people. I have it in my house, and I also use a mosquito net.
But there may be a solution on the horizon, as one research institute in Seoul says they have found a way to control the number of mosquitoes that's better than using chemicals. The institute says it paid particular attention to the fact that mosquitoes can pass through spaces as small as 2 millimeters.
Since Seoul is a large city, we paid attention to damp, humid places around residential areas, and sewer manholes and ventilation pipes for septic tanks came up as prime suspects.
Manholes or septic tank ventilation pipes provide the perfect warm and damp conditions for female mosquitoes to lay their eggs. These places are also filled with germs that are potentially dangerous to humans. The research institute says using rubber like this or nets like these can fill gaps so that fewer mosquitoes can escape from sewers. Another advantage, they're cheaper than using chemicals. The rubber seal and the nets cost somewhere between 3,000 to 10,000 Korean won, which is roughly $2 to $8 US. The chemical that each district office in Seoul uses can cost up to 150 million Korean won, or roughly $110,000 per year. So how do we actually use these nets and rubber seals? First, the manhole lid needs to be opened. Then, the rubber seal should be placed to fill gaps before the lid is closed again. Also, on septic tank ventilation pipes, the exposed end of the pipe can be covered with a very fine net. This way, mosquitoes are unable to escape. The institute tried its method at 400 buildings within a 1-kilometer radius of the Sangam-dong neighborhood in Mapogu district. It said 220,000 mosquitoes, or about 48.9%, were kept under control simply by closing or covering gaps. The researchers said they will now recommend these methods for areas in Seoul that have the largest mosquito populations. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Sri Lanka, the acting president has declared a state of emergency. Coming amid fresh protests, acting president Ranil Wickremesinghe made the declaration on Monday amid growing calls for him to resign. The decree allows the acting president to authorize detentions, seize property, and search any premises. He can also alter or suspend any law. The move was made 2 days before Sri Lankan lawmakers choose a new president as they work on forming a unity government. This comes after former leader Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country and stepped down following months of anti-government protests in the wake of an economic crisis. Wickremesinghe, who was Prime Minister under Rajapaksa before becoming acting president, said on Monday that Sri Lanka is close to negotiating a bailout from the International Monetary Fund. He added that steps are also being taken to address fuel and cooking gas shortages. In the US, there have been updates in the trials of both the Parklands and Buffalo shooters. The Parklands case saw prosecutors on Monday call on jurors to sentence the gunman to death. This after Nicholas Cruz pleaded guilty in October to killing 17 people in a mass shooting at Florida's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parklands in 2018. He now faces a jury that will decide whether he gets a life sentence or the death penalty. Meanwhile, Peyton Gendron, the man accused of killing 10 black people at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, has pleaded not guilty to charges of 14 hate crimes and 13 firearms offenses. Despite a stop on federal executions last year, Attorney General Mick Garland has not ruled out seeking the death penalty should Gendron be found guilty. In Ghana, 2 cases have been confirmed of the highly infectious Marburg virus. The official confirmation came Sunday after 2 people who tested positive for the virus died earlier this month. Ghana Health Services have said that they are working to reduce the spread of the virus by isolating those known to have had contact. The confirmation makes this the second such outbreak in West Africa, with the first occurring last year in Guinea. The World Health Organization say fatality rates for the virus have varied from 24% to 88% in previous outbreaks. The virus is transmitted to people from fruit bats, spreading among humans through contact with bodily fluids. Dangling from dizzying heights, participants from around the world gathered for the world's first ever Highline World Championships. Taking place from July 15th to the 17th in Laax, Switzerland, 24 men and 7 women performed tricks and crossed slack lines at the summit of Krapsongjon, some 2,250 meters above sea level. David Hermes of the US was named the winner in the men's freestyle category, while France's Louise Lenoble won in the women's event. The freestyle section gave participants access to 3 separate lines, each spanning 65 meters with varying degrees of tension. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Tuesday afternoon. Rain in southern areas has tapered off, giving way to oppressive heat and newly issued heat advisories. So Seoul reaching 31 degrees, that is slightly higher than yesterday, and Daegu topping off at 34 degrees. While soaring temperatures unsettle the air, bringing sudden showers centered in Gangwon-do province of 5 to 20 millimeters. So don't forget to bring your umbrella if you live there. With the skies brightening up, southern regions have to brace for sweltering heat above 33 degrees. So Gyeongsang-do, Jeollanam-do provinces and Jeju Island are under a heat advisory. And you also need to factor in the high UV index and ozone level. So please refrain from unnecessary travel in the afternoon sun, especially as ozone can't be filtered out by a mask. While scorching hot weather should continue for the time being, and rain in the south will set in on Thursday. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
Right, on that note, we say goodbye. We'll be back with more coverage tomorrow. Thank you for now.